privacy and trust in data ecosystem, as you can imagine, is not only huge, it's fast evolving. There are tons of ideas and challenges that the teams are going through. It's simply impossible for me to go through all of them in 20 minutes. So what I will do instead is I would apply an engineering lens to this space, define some of the concepts, go through some of the challenges and emerging ideas, and hopefully leave you with some ideas that you can try in your organizations when you go back from the conference. So why now? Traditionally, as you would know, organizations only were interested in their domain specific data. Even that, they collected from the individual data owners themselves directly or through authoritative sources that came with proof. Today, domain specific information alone is not enough. Customer experience defines success. Algorithms are hungry for data. Data is everywhere. However, it's becoming almost impossible to verify and ensure trustworthiness of the data. So the individuals are beginning to feel a little bit not in control of what data is being collected on them or how it's being used to make decisions about them. Individuals are not alone on this. Even in organizations, the perceived black box nature of the advanced algorithms and the emerging data ecosystems are somewhat introducing this adoption challenge. So that reminds me of an anecdote I heard recently, where apparently in the military, it took soldiers such a long time to trust a trained dog in the field. That analogy applies to the emerging data ecosystems and algorithms, especially AI driven. So it's in this context, the trust and privacy preserving data ecosystems gain their attention. So, what exactly is a trusted data ecosystem? Personal data is becoming an economic asset class of its own. So, shown on the slide here is a snippet from 2011 World Economic Forum report that kind of captured the mindset at that time. Over the 11 years, people have largely become aware of the role data plays in their life. However, that last part of that snippet, which is creating that balanced and inherently trust preserving ecosystem, still remains to be a challenge. So, if data creating a privacy preserving trusted ecosystem is such a challenge, what exactly is the system that we need to arrive at? You can't create something without understanding what it is. Obviously, it's a huge topic, but in a nutshell, a trusted data ecosystem, which is privacy preserving, must ensure every data access is privacy preserved. So, data is only one part of the ecosystem. The algorithms that operate on the data must also have a documented, measurable means to measure their trustworthiness. Even more importantly, the whole idea of a trusted ecosystem is we want to bring individual data owners back into their right space of ownership, which means we need to be able to explain to users in a simple to understand manner what exactly an algorithm does on their data and the impacts of it so that they can safely and confidently provide their consent for us to operate that algorithm. But that requires a lot of thought in terms of defining an algorithm in a way that we can describe to end users. The other thing is, nothing helps build trust like collaboration. So, a trusted data ecosystem must inherently be collaborative in its nature of governance. Just by having siloed governance or having processes that all participants do not understand might not work for the future. So the other and last but important point is, like anything in business, if you want people to do something, we want to be able to clearly tell them what are the incentives for them to be doing the thing that we're asking them to do. In a data-driven world, uh, effective and superior insights are the highest currency. So a trusted ecosystem can and must offer superior insights to all participants. Data protection has received a lot of attention over the years. It is an essential part of any trusted data ecosystem. However, as the attacks of the forms and the frequency of the attacks are changing, so should the ways and thinking around how a data ecosystem must be protected. Data trust is even more bigger problem because it requires a mindset change. A data trust inherently advocates personal data must be viewed as private property. So ensuring that we treat personal data as private property and only access it with explicit client consent is a challenge for organizations. So just with those things, it's just a snippet of it, but it shows the way that the world stands today. People understand, not just for organizations or individuals, but society as a whole, understand this need, or even so it's not a new topic, privacy, but for a little bit it seemed like the privacy kind of took the backseat, where we kind of ran after shiny objects. But right now it's like people kind of want to take back their privacy as much as they can. As a society, everybody's trying to think about privacy, and increasingly people are taking that into consideration in their business selections, which means organizations have it really in their interest to proactively increase the trust score in the minds of their consumers, so they will be the choice of their targeted consumers. However, there are some problems that organizations are inherently facing. It's not nothing new, but these problems are to be understood in the journey of creating a fully privacy preserving trusted ecosystem. So siloed data is a problem for new and old organizations alike. There are several reasons that contribute to the creation of siloed data, such as long history of mergers and acquisitions, vendor solutions, domain-specific operational stores, the perceived value or advantage in data exclusivity, archaic data sharing processes that are not conducive to data sharing, manual workflows. Those are some of the things that impede sort of a very well accessible data ecosystem or contribute towards a siloed data ecosystem. Regardless of the cause, siloed data ecosystems present a challenge in fast establishing privacy preserving trusted ecosystems. So shown in the slides are some of the challenges in the context of trust a siloed data ecosystem presents. The full potential of a fully privacy preserving data ecosystem is not yet fully understood by all. So given the laws they're coming, but they're not sufficient enough to force everyone to think of privacy preserving trusted data ecosystem as an absolute must for operating the business. That day is soon approaching, but since we are not yet there yet, at least in Canada, the things that's really driving organizations to think about establishing ecosystems like this is the consumer confidence. So as people are taking into consideration the trustworthiness of data ecosystems more and more into their business selections, organizations naturally feel the need to increase that trust profile in the minds of their consumers. So this title sounds like all doom and gloom, but it is not. It is somewhat of a problem that highlights the issue of users feeling a little bit at loss because there's no objective, globally accepted, standard ways to measure trust and some of the other things that are listed on that slide. However, on the tech side, companies like Apple's are spearheading putting trust in the front seat. Also, for regulated organizations like banks, like RBC, the emerging data systems are still new, but for a long history, we've always considered, because we are a regulated industry, we operated in a way that the client trust is upheld and documented and reported. So these measures help companies like RBC and give them an advantage where the mindset is already there. And also the experience of how do you achieve these trusted ecosystem is already there in terms of the architecture principles and practices that the organization already employ. Using that with the emerging data system, one of the things like banks like RBC are doing is inherently incorporating these trust principles from day one on the emerging data ecosystem. However, as a large society, it is a problem for many organizations of retaining that trust. So poor quality of personal data, it presents somewhat of a catch-22 situation. If your data is good and it's organized well, for organizations, it's easier to establish a full footprint of what personal data they have in their custody. Absence of good quality data impedes that choice, that state. Sort of the other side of that is when an ecosystem is not trustworthy and it doesn't incentivize or encourage people to share additional data, the users don't often come volunteer to share more and more their additional data. So it's a catch-22 thing. The poor quality kind of impedes the establishment of the trusted state, and not having the trusted data kind of slows down the good quality data flow in. So the organizations need to understand this and topically approach how to improve the data quality. So the whole premises of this talk is we need to make the individual data owners feel they're in control when it comes to how their data is collected and used. How do we do that? Is by means of collecting explicit consents from consumers. This too presents challenges for many organizations because although traditionally there have been some form or another consent collection, right now with the advent of digital channels, it is extremely important to collect consents that are accurate, that are session specific in some cases. There's so many different various forms and frequencies of consent. So the organizations must first need to collect them all timely, accurately consolidate them, and create this single source of truth that is easy to consume, that really depicts the preferences of the consumer. But consent plays a huge role in helping establishing a trusted ecosystem. So with that, everybody knows a privacy preserving trusted ecosystem saves money to the organization. Here are some examples from the news. There's no disagreement on the benefits of having it. It's just the challenges that the people are struggling with. Based on that, there are some mindsets emerging where the smartest and the brightest people are putting their heads together, seeing here's the benefits and here's the target state that we want to arrive at, and these are the challenges that are impeding it. So how do we arrive at a state that can help all participants of a data ecosystem? So I'll highlight in the next two slides some of the ideas that are emerging, and maybe in this, and then followed by the subsequent slides where I'll show you how these ideas can be brought into a more of a architectural view where organizations can really apply them. So traditionally, in data ecosystems, the prevailing thought or the instinct was to centralize data. There are several impracticalities in that. It's hard, impossible. And also from the trust point, it creates this single point of failure in case of breaches. So which means a federated trust network is unavoidable. Data remains distributed and organizations need to have a mechanism to clearly define trust principles applied across these distributed data stores in a uniform manner. The other thing is client consent, as I alluded to a couple of times already. Getting explicit and unambiguous, retractable consent from data subjects is essential towards establishing a privacy preserving trusted ecosystem. Now, if you want to have a federated trust network, it is extremely important to have a decentralized architecture and data stores. So, which means APIs and distributed gateways need to understand the company's vision of trust, appetite, and culture, and need to be able to apply them in a distributed manner, provisioning, deprovisioning services, or allowing, denying requests. All of that needs to happen distributed. But the most important point is the company must still be able to collect those trust artifacts centrally and be able to use that to guide them in understanding their trust profile. The resiliency against attack, it just doesn't apply only to trusted data ecosystem. It applies everywhere, but it is even more important in a trusted data ecosystem that the data sharers feel the confidence that their data will be protected. But because it's no longer just protecting data against theft or unauthorized access, but now organizations must also think about poisoning and manipulation and cheating of algorithms and services that are offered by their services. Moving the algorithm to data is not a new thing, but in the context of establishing a privacy preserving trusted ecosystem, it provides a nicer way whereby the trust principles can be locally applied, and the domains have the freedom to withhold their data and allow the algorithms to come to them. So the idea is, wherever possible, keep the raw data with the data owner. And the data and algorithms they go hand in hand. You can have a mountain of data. If the algorithms aren't great, you lose the battle. Like same way the other way around. So vetting the algorithms to ensure they are bias free, ethical, privacy preserving, and trusted is also extremely important. And in terms of providing and serving the results back from the execution of algorithms, by default, opt for aggregated answers and only release person identifying information with explicit consent. So these are some of the ideas that the people are thinking about. When you put it like that, it makes sense, but it requires a lot of thought and a lot of details need to be ironed out in terms of how you go from the idea state to apply that. So, one of the ideas that as society as a whole is arriving at is privacy and trust is not just concerns for within the organizational boundaries, or is it not individual concern? As a society as a whole, having privacy and trust is an important concern that everybody is tuned into, which means it's not possible to solve this in isolation in a silo. The more brains come together and ideate together and collaborate, the better the outcomes become. In this context, there are communities and consortiums are forming up to find a way to collaboratively solve the harder to solve problems and move the society as a whole towards a privacy preserving, trusted world of data and algorithms. So, Open Algorithm or OPAL is one such consortium that was founded in 2017, has very high profile names like the MIT Media Lab, Imperial College London, World Economic Forum, and several others. And they published their white paper on data sharing, which I found captures most of the stuff that I talked about before. And then it kind of gives a visual representation on how to go about turning these ideas into implementation stage. So the thing to focus more on this slide is the aspect of so there are really three things. So the data repositories are distributed, the algorithms are vetted and really documented to explain what they are in a way that all participants of the ecosystem can understand. And then there are distributed gateways. They understand the company's vision and policy towards trust, and then be able to apply them in a distributed manner and contribute the artifacts back to a central repository where global decisions can be made. Now, only one thing that was missing in that picture is client consent. So client consent has to be constructed in a manner that is accurate from a single source of truth, and it is extremely easy to consume by these distributed data stores. Putting them together, it creates an architecture that allows three things among many other things. One, organizations can attempt this safely in areas that they feel the most priority, and then they can gradually increase where the step-by-step incremental development kind of add on to the company vision. The other thing is clear separation of concerns, and then it creates, and the last thing is it creates this common language and a paradigm where in this complex problem becomes easy to communicate, and everyone's striving towards a common standard and an ambition in terms of establishing a privacy preserving data ecosystem. So in a nutshell, distributed trust checking means that domains have the ability to apply trust, and then it happens in a distributed manner. And so as companies are going towards a data mesh architecture, it provides a nicer means for domains to do this enforcement locally and ensure that the results get formulated back globally so that companies can make trust profile related decisions. And also, as I mean, algorithms and MLOps go hand in hand. So nothing like programmatically enforcing things are happening. So the MLOps and frameworks like that need to ensure trust concerns are an inherent fixture in the frameworks. The other important problem in this whole story is measuring trust. It is extremely complex problem, and then there isn't any objective, globally accepted standard manner for measuring trust. However, instead of waiting for that green day, what companies can do today is sort of looking at trust as maybe two parts. One, a willingness expressed in an individual data collector, owner, towards sharing their personal data with organizations. The other part of that equation is, okay, it's great that they're sharing. How do we measure the value that we generate, not just for the organizations, but also for the data sharers? So these two items, when looked at it like that, kind of create somewhat of a form that would help organization to measure trust in the meantime. Now, how do you achieve this? One way of doing that is sort of somewhat convert data sharing into a transactional activity, meaning having, like, one approach could be having some sort of an incentive program whereby either trust currency or some sort of a reward points is shared so the users can use them, and then companies have a way of transactionally sort of quantifying trust. I know we are coming close in time, so a couple of last slides whereby, so people know that creating a fully privacy preserving trusted ecosystem takes time. So in the meantime, there are some ideas coming up in terms of how do you help? So there's only two things that come in. One is data and the other is algorithm. So how can we help the data side of the equation in the interim? And how do you help the algorithm side in the interim? So synthetic data is sort of, as the name suggests, is statistically similar in terms of the regular data, but it is actually synthetic. So it kind of alleviates these trust concerns and provide a mechanism for data scientists and engineers to create models, where the ethical AI framework works sort of come in the other side and ensures that the framework inherently checks the models are adhering to things that we need to classify an ecosystem as trustworthy. So in conclusion, a privacy-preserving trusted data ecosystem yields revenue growth and competitive advantage to organizations. It provides transparency to all participants. It gives control to individuals with respect to their personal data. Most importantly, it also starts to talk about providing monetary incentives to data owners.